Welcome back for the final installment of our story, which is coming a little later because we had to take our little girl, Gooch, to the vet to deal with some respiratory issues. She's fine now. I will be once this week of putting a pill down her throat is over. But now, part 3 of The 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur C. Clarke. I still don't like it, he said 7 days later, as the tough little mountain ponies carried them down the winding road. And don't you think I'm running away, because I'm afraid. I'm just sorry for those poor old guys up there, and I don't want to be around when they find out what suckers they've been. I wonder how Sam will take it. It's funny, replied Chuck, but when I said goodbye, I got the idea he knew we were walking out on him, and that he didn't care because he knew the machine was running smoothly, and that the job would soon be finished. After that, well, of course, for him there just isn't any after that. George turned in his saddle and stared back up the mountain road. This was the last place from which one could get a clear view of the lamasery. The squat, angular buildings were silhouetted against the afterglow of the sunset. Here and there, lights gleamed like portholes in the side of an ocean liner. Electric lights, of course, sharing the same circuit as the Mark V. How much longer would they share it? Wondered George. Would the monks smash up the computer in their rage and disappointment? Or would they just sit down quietly and begin their calculations all over again? He knew exactly what was happening up on the mountain at this very moment. The High Lama and his assistants would be sitting in their silk robes inspecting the sheets as junior monks carried them away from the typewriters and pasted them into the great volumes. No one would be saying anything. The only sound would be the incessant patter, the never-ending rainstorm of the keys hitting the paper, for the Mark V itself was utterly silent as it flashed through its thousands of calculations a second. 3 months of this, thought George, was enough to start anyone climbing up the wall. There she is, called Chuck, pointing down into the valley. Ain't she beautiful? She certainly was, George thought. The battered old DC-3 lay at the end of the runway like a tiny silver cross. In 2 hours she would be bearing them away to freedom and sanity. It was a thought worth savoring like a fine liqueur. George let it roll around in his mind as the pony trudged patiently down the slope. The swift night of the high Himalayas was now almost upon them. Fortunately, the road was very good, as roads went in that region, and they were both carrying torches. There was not the slightest danger, only a certain discomfort from the bitter cold. The sky overhead was perfectly clear and ablaze with the familiar, friendly stars. At least there would be no risk, thought George, of the pilot being unable to take off because of weather conditions. That had been his only remaining worry. He began to sing, but gave it up after a while. This vast arena of mountains gleaming like whitely hooded ghosts on every side did not encourage such ebullience. Presently, George glanced at his watch. Should be there in an hour, he called back over his shoulder to Chuck. Then he added in an afterthought, Wonder if the computer's finished its run. It was due about now. Chuck didn't reply, so George swung around in his saddle. He could just see Chuck's face, a white oval, turned toward the sky. Look, whispered Chuck, and George shifted his eyes to heaven. There is always a last time for everything. Overhead, without any fuss, the stars were going out. And here ends The 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur C. Clarke. I'll see you tomorrow with some poetry. Have a good night.